Hi, my name is Ben, and I want to tell you the story about how we planted a New King Church in the least religious city in America. It's an amazing story full of God's provision and miracles, and it brings Him great glory for us to tell it. And so I want you to hear this story and also to hear how you could become a part of what God is doing here in Burlington, Vermont. Back in 2016, God began to use the story of Jonah to call my wife and I to Vermont to plant a church. And we started to pray about where that might be in Vermont. We felt like He was going to call us to a modern day Nineveh, a place that God had a great heart to see revival in that city. And in the summer of 2016, as I was doing a read through the Bible in a year, the day came for me to read the book of Jonah. And as I sat down to read the book of Jonah, I received a phone call that someone wanted to buy our house and put a full price offer on it. We couldn't believe what God was doing. He was clearly spitting us out of the mouth of the whale, so to speak, and calling us to somewhere in Vermont. After I got off the phone with this real estate agent, I sat and I read the book of Jonah, and it was perfectly clear. God was calling us to Burlington, Vermont, to plant a church. We moved 45 days later, and we began to live in the city and pray about the church that God wanted us to start. Just a few months later, in the beginning of 2017, a small group from what was Burlington City Church became the core group and the launch team for New King Church. We started meeting every week just discussing what it would look like to be a church that helped as many people as possible find and follow Jesus. And we had this dream in our hearts to not just plant one church, but to start a family of churches, to start a church planting church that would plant 5 churches in the next 10 years. Over the next year, we laid out our vision. We met regularly. We started to see people coming in and becoming a part of what God was doing. And in February of 2018, we had our grand opening. Since that time, we have seen the blessing of God on our church. We have seen people coming to faith and getting baptized. We've seen new people raising up into leadership and stepping into responsibilities and roles that they've never taken on before. We have seen communities starting to be built, and we've got community groups across the city. And we've been diving into the Word and discipling new believers. And it's been incredible. Well, just a few months after our grand opening, we found out that we weren't going to be able to continue meeting in the space that we started out. And so we started to pray that He would provide for us, that He would give us a building, that He would actually just hand us the keys to a property. Well, little did we know, a small church was praying about closing the doors, and they were asking God, bring another church to take our property, a church that would use it for your glory and to further your kingdom. Well, supernaturally, God made our paths come together, and this church handed us the keys to a property that had 3 buildings worth over $1 million on one of the busiest roads in the whole Burlington area. We are being called to take this property and to steward it, to create a sending and equipping center, a place from which we imagine people being raised up and equipped and sent out to start new churches. We see this happening with 3 big projects. Number 1 is a modern and welcoming worship auditorium, and that includes a modernized front and entryway to the building. The second thing that we see is space that is specially fitted for the next generation, for our kids to grow up in a church where they can learn about Jesus and learn how to follow Him better. And then the third big thing is the building on the property that is a barn house. We see transforming that into a house for apprentices, a place where a church planting resident and his family could come and live for a time and be trained up and sent out to plant another church. And with those 3 big projects combined, we see the whole property becoming an equipping and sending center. And this being the hub of a family of churches that will be planted throughout the region that we live. but we need your help. And that's the reason I wanted to share this story is we believe that God is calling more people than just us into this. And it's gonna take people and resources and time for this to happen. And so here's the big question. Is God calling you to join in this story in some way? Is he calling you to pray for us? Is he calling you to give towards this project? Is he calling you to give your life towards this? Maybe you're thinking about planting a church and you're supposed to come and partner with us and be one of the church planters that we send out to plant one of the new churches in this area. Would you pray about how God might be inviting you into the story that he's writing here in Burlington, Vermont?